Welcome. So what I'd like to go over real quickly here is how to set up Sublime, Python 3, and ConEmu, which are the three packages slash applications that we installed in the last video. We did all that on a Windows desktop, so I'd like to briefly go over that about how you would set that up on a Linux desktop. And the good news is that we'll go through them one by one. We don't need ConEmu on a Linux desktop. The reason why is because Linux gives us a full-featured, full-blown, insane command prompt where you can destroy your entire system and do anything you want if you know the right commands and you have the right privileges. Windows takes an entirely different approach, whereas the command line or the command cmd.exe / the command prompt is an afterthought to some extent for Windows. When it comes to Linux, the command prompt is where it all begins. And then a GUI and the sort of the windowing environment, that's the afterthought. So if you can have a terminal in Linux, you can essentially just blow up your whole system. You can do anything you want, assuming you know what you're doing. And maybe more to the point, if you don't know what you're doing, you can certainly destroy everything. So ConEmu, we don't need at all. The majority of people who are watching this or whatnot are probably running some version of like a Red Hat or an Ubuntu or something like that. They probably don't need to install Python 3 because it's already installed. If you do need to install Python 3, consult your Ubuntu documentation, consult your Red Hat documentation, as the case may be. So you're pretty much all set in that regard. But nevertheless, I'd like to walk through a little bit of it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to VNC, which is a program for remote control, allows you to remotely control other computers. I'm going to VNC into a Ubuntu machine and just sort of poke around a little bit and make sure that we have Python 3, make sure we install Sublime, which is the one step that we actually have to manually make sure that we do. And then also make sure that the command prompt is nice and tidy and gives us the permissions that we want. So again, Windows 8. So I'm going to hit the Windows key. I get this. I'm just going to type VNC. VNC Viewer is what I want. The server address is pre-populated because I was fooling around with it before, but basically the IP address or the network address is 10.0.0.2. I'm going to hit connect. No password. So the takes a second, but eventually the graphics and all that will snap in. You can see my funky wallpaper here. There's a pink rhino or something that's controlling a guy. So good times there. So what I would like to do is basically run through all three at once. So I have terminal pegged to my what's called, again, it's an Ubuntu system. So if you're running Fedora or something like that, the terminology may differ a little bit, but basically I have my terminal program pegged over here on the left, which is just this weird little thing, and it says terminal. But if you don't see that, then what you can do is either hit the Windows key to bring this up, or just click this top left thing. Again, I'm assuming an Ubuntu system, but Fedora and all that is not too far off. And if you're using a if you're using a far out there windowing system on Linux like XFCE or Mir or Wayland or something like that, then I'm assuming that you actually know what you're doing as far as like a navigation of the system goes, and I leave it up to you to decide, how to pull up the terminal and how to figure out if you have Python 3. There's way too many Linux distributions to go through, so I'm just kind of dealing with the mainstream ones, Ubuntu being the primary example here. So we pulled this thing up in the upper left, and in the Windows key does the same thing. So if we hit the Windows key, it goes away. Hit it again, comes back. goes away, comes back, kind of the same sort of functionality we expect, or similar to what you get in a Windows environment. So pops up this window. First thing we're going to do is we're just going to type in software. And you can see that the first hit is the Ubuntu Software Center. So we're just going to click that. It's going to start up the Ubuntu Software Center, which allows us to basically install apps, look at what's installed, install other programs, things we might find interesting. There's a community star rating, things like that. We're not going to worry about too much of that. The terminal program we know we're all set with. We're not even going to mess around with that. I highly recommend not messing around with the terminal program for a variety of reasons, but basically the Linux terminal is so massively powerful that there's no reason that you would ever need to augment it. If you want it to have a different display or something like that, that's fine, but there's no reason for you to ever have a drop-in replacement, because there's really probably no such thing. But I digress. So the second thing that we want to look for is Python. So we're just going to type in Python. And what we see here is that there is it lists a whole bunch of Python stuff. And the green check marks here and here basically mean that it's already been installed. So if we look at this, Python 3.4 is already installed. We can hit more info and things like that. There's some subtlety here, because the reason why Python 3.4 is already installed is because the Ubuntu Software Center requires it. So when Ubuntu is set up and installed on an OS, Python 3 is automatically installed in order for the Software Center to run. So if you run Ubuntu and you run a fairly modern version, odds are you already have Python 3. If you don't have Python 3 and you run kind of an older version, like I don't even know the names off the top of my head, but what you would do is essentially the same thing we did. Open up the Software Center, type in Python. It's going to list all this stuff. You could even filter it down by just doing that. So, I mean, we have Python 3 right here, which is a meta package, which essentially just makes sure that you have some version of Python 3 on your system. We do. We have 3.4 in this case. If you didn't have it, what you would do is essentially just type in Python 3 and look for one of these packages and then just install it. And it would make sure that it doesn't clobber the 2.7 or the 2 series or anything like that. So, again, Linux is a little bit of a different beast. Maybe a little bit is an exaggeration, but definitely a different animal. So the next thing we want to do is, so we have a terminal, we have Python 3, we need an IDE, we need a text editor, we want Sublime, so that we can at least have some consistency across our Linux to Windows platform. So we're going to go back up here, or even we just click on this, but we're going to go back here, go to the Software Center, and we're going to look for Sublime. And we get a user interface library, development files for the Sublime user interface, and more development files. Let's see if we can maybe shorten this a little bit and just do like, I don't know, Sublime. No, we get the same thing. So what we're going to have to do is kind of install it manually. So we are going to go to Google. I happen to be running Ubuntu, so I'm gonna. It just has to be sort of tailored to Ubuntu. But if you were running Fedora or I don't know, Mandrake or some crazy thing like that, you could certainly tailor your stuff. So let's close that because I hear crazy stuff in the background. We'll close that and then that and then that. All right. So someone was running ads, but anyway, we'll do Ubuntu install Sublime 2 text 2. How do I install Sublime Text 2-3? So This is where things get weird with Linux, in the sense that if you want to install something that's not in the official sort of like package manager, as it were. So like, why is Sublime not in the package manager is what you might be asking yourself. The reason is that there's so many damn programs out there. Distributions like Ubuntu and stuff like that, they do their best to maintain, you know, what they think is great, and to include the packages that have a huge impact and help people. But there's just so many that there's no way that they can include everyone. And this is kind of like the same thing that Windows runs into too. Like, every Windows program you've ever installed, like, is probably, the vast majority of them are probably third party. What if there was like a centralized Windows repository to where you could just be like, yo, install conemu? Like, how do they know that it's a good thing? How do they know that it's not like a virus, or that it's a worthy program, or that it's like, you know, production tested? Linux has the same sort of problem. So what you wind up doing is doing a lot of the stuff by the command line. So in order to install, we're just going to assume that this guy's right. Which is a huge, dangerous assumption. Don't believe anything you read in the internet, but nevertheless. So what he's saying is that we need to basically just paste these 3 lines into a command line. So the first thing we're going to do is just copy this one. We might be able to get away with copying all 3 and then just pasting them in, but I'll prefer, because I'm just like mildly paranoid, to do them all at once. Now I can go over here and click on the terminal because I have it pegged to my sort of Unity thing, but just for the sake of brevity, or I mean just for completeness, what I would do is go up to the top left, type in terminal, and then terminal shows up, click on it. Now I have a terminal window. I have a Linux terminal window. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste that in, paste. So anything that's prefixed with sudo is going to require root privileges, which is kind of outside the scope of this video. And I apologize if that's not something you're familiar with if you're using Linux. But then again, if you're using Linux and you're not familiar with root privileges or sudo, then you probably shouldn't be using Linux. You should read about it online. Come to grips with what sudo and root means, and then go back and reinstall it or start using it again or something like that. So I don't want to focus too much on what sudo means, but basically I have to type in a password in order for this to authorize this operation to complete. So I type in that password, it checks out, and basically it's like hit enter to continue, which I'm going to do. And then it goes through, it does its thing. So that worked out well. I didn't get an error. So now I'm going to copy this second line, paste it in, hit enter. I've already done the sudo authorization. So whenever you type sudo in Linux, it forces you to authorize, basically be like, are you the root? Are you the administrator? So in the Windows world, you have the concept of like local administrator, domain administrator. Linux is no different. Whenever you see something that says like sudo as in the context of Linux, it's essentially asking you, are you a local administrator? So you have to type in a password that says yes. So I've already typed in that password. Linux has a sort of memory span of, I think it's like 5 to 10 minutes or something like that. It won't ask me again until those 5 or 10 minutes expires. So I've done the second command. It completed successfully. It read some package lists, checked some things. I'm going to go ahead and cut this second line. And this is actually the important one. You can see that if we just sort of dial back here, the first one is adding a repository. If you have any sense of software development or how like packaging works and just sort of like distributed development, things like that, you know what's going on right here. It's essentially just adding a repository that it's going to look at for the Sublime package. This repository, it just didn't it was not known to the system before. That's all that's going on. The second one is basically just doing an update to say, hey, do you have the most recent package lists? You know, similar to Windows Update or WSUS or something like that. And then the third line is basically just saying, install this frickin' thing, because that's all I really wanted to do in the first place. So let's just go ahead and paste that. We'll do that. It's going to go ahead. It's going to install it. It's going to handle the dependencies and all that kind of stuff for me, so I don't have to actually worry about anything. Similar to a Windows installer or an MSI or something like that, I don't have to worry about anything. So the install is completed. I will just type Sublime. I will hit Tab. Similar to Windows, if you're doing like a CD program files, you hit Tab, it auto completes. Linux is no different, but it does it for commands as well instead of directories. So you could just hit like, I don't know, sub, similar to what I did, and then I'll just hit Tab, and then it says, okay, well, you know, there's no ambiguity up to SUBL, and then I hit some ambiguity and I'm triggering this sound. So I hit Tab twice, and then it says, well, I have sub L and then I have Sublime Text. So I want Sublime Text. I'll just do the I to remove any ambiguity. Hit Tab once more, auto completes, hit Enter, and then I have Sublime Text. Exactly in the same way that the Sublime Text is no different on Linux than it is on Windows. So everything is good. We're looking fine. We had to jump through some hoops in order to make that work, but such is life, and such is Linux, I guess, is maybe a better way to put it. Linux is great for development. It just takes a little getting used to. It's my preferred development environment, hands down, no questions. It's not even a thing, but yep. So we have Python 3. There we go. Don't worry about that, but we could just do Python 3. Tell me what version you are. 3.4. That works. We have a great command prompt, and as evidenced by the fact that it can go full screen, and we can clear it. We can do you know, all kinds of crazy stuff, and the syntax is entirely different. But suffice to say, the Linux command prompt is insanely powerful, so we don't have to worry about con emu or anything like that. And then we have Sublime Text, so we have a nice sort of like lightweight IDE text editor code monkey thing in the same way that we have on Windows. So basically we have two sort of equivalent environments. Linux a little different, Windows a little different, and porting between or dealing with code between the two is something that we will debate, or not even debate, but something that we will deal with heavily and kind of learn how to deal with. But suffice to say that programs that are written on Linux absolutely do not run on Windows and vice versa, and that's no accident. It's just no accident, and there's a whole laundry list of reasons as to why that is. So what I'm going to do is, I'll actually back up here. So next thing I want to do is minimize my, or not minimize, but unmaximize my VNC session. So I'm going to go to the top of the screen. I get this little drop down. Do that. Not maximized anymore. So now I'm looking at this. I got VNC Viewer. I'm just going to go ahead and scroll up to the top of the window. I'm going to disconnect my session because I'm you know, good housekeeping. I'm a gentleman. And there we go. So the Linux machine is now set up to do Python 3 development with Sublime and have good console. And the Windows environment is set up to do Python 3 development with Sublime and a decent console as well. So we're in a good spot, and then we'll actually maybe dive into this or get into some more theory at some point in the next video. I'm not really sure which direction we're going to go in, but I feel like there's a whole lot that we've covered this far, and there's a whole lot of questions, I'm sure, as far as like jumping remote controlling a Linux machine and stuff like that. It's kind of crazy. So I'm not really sure the direction we're going to go in the next video, but I look forward to it. And as always, let me know any suggestions.